do that.
And that's it.
Well, so what we want to do is get a little bit of Chris, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to try and get the uplink stream going on here. Let's get another chair. So that's the first good break we've had. Oh, and we need to get somebody to test the sound.
This is the hand.
Yeah. Go to the Meetup. Thank you. Oh, check the settings and make sure we're using the mic from the camera, not the one from here.
Absolutely.
Well, no, but we don't. If we're using this, we want to use this mic, not that mic, not the onboard mic.
Streaming now.
It should be, yeah.
Yes.
Now this is a. So you got audio? Is that us?
Yeah.
Okay, I can't really tell. Sounds like bad AM radio.
It's buffered.
It should be, yeah. Okay, good. All right.
There you go.
All right. So yeah, you can kill that. No, see, before at this point you couldn't even. All you hear was this.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So no, you can. Okay, I'm done listening to myself. Thanks, Matt. That you've been very helpful.
What about now?
Okay. There's some, yeah, over in the corner. Yeah, no, that's the funny thing with tuning the camera. It's like
All the way?
Yeah, if it's just those lights.
right. The resolution on the camera is probably pretty good. Oh, it's very romantic, Omar.
We'll have to wait. We're buffered. Well, that didn't turn down these lights. Gotta wait. It's buffered. How much shade? There. It's just about to.
Resolution on the camera is probably pretty good.
Hold on.
Gotta wait. It's buffered. It's a big buffer. There. Just about it.
Chris, can you grab a slide or something?
Sure.
I want to see if your stream is.
Oh, that's like actually working?
Yeah, no, it is. No, we're
working now.
we're making up for lost time.
What is wrong with my computer?
Uh-oh.
No, I just can't type.
All right, now remind me how I used to
Wow,
get
that's a long
uplink
buffer.
going.
It's gotta be like a minute.
That's the YouTube link?
Yeah, well, sort of the Google Hangout.
Okay.
So anything that's as big as that red is.
What do you think?
If you can read it, if you can hear it and you can read it, that's a success. Looks good. No, looks good. I can read that. I'm fucking blind. All right. Next. So this is where it gets interesting. Dude,
It's probably my wife.
So people
She's like,
watching,
yeah.
that's it.
so yeah, if you, okay, well, yeah, I guess. Is Stephanie around? No, I won't get. No, if I can hook you up. Oh, actually, yeah.
Maybe.
That's right. You may compete.
You got the stream working?
Yeah, I got one. I got the Google Hangouts up. Both systems are got power.
Well, that's enough.
I'm using these funky cameras, which are actually pretty good. So we're
They
close.
Make this table look like an alien, so that's cool.
Now I'm going for the bonus, which is this is uplink.
It's not too far.
How do I do this?
Oh, did we do anything?
Oh yeah.
Something worse. There's a lot more buttons back behind that thing than I expected to see. So,
Okay. Now.
is anybody seeing the microphone?
Oh, it's yes.
Okay.
Any of you, twist the thing on the bottom.
Twist it.
I think.
Oh, there's a button.
All right. Now how?
Yes.
Yes. Now. Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Here. Maybe you're smarter than I am. So this is uplink. I have a live event. Looks like I'm in pre-event mode.
Okay.
See this? So this is the thing I just created, status pre-event. I wonder how I would make it go live.
You're asking the wrong dude.
All right. I did it once.
It's not the-
Details.
It's not the play button?
Let's try that. No, I think it's,
Oh,
Well,
that's
that's
to like
playing-
preview it.
yeah, that's, this is really slick. It's so slick that, captions. Maybe it wasn't this details thing. I'm just not seeing the detail. Ah, there we go. I got it.
Sorry to work out. Are you really? Nice. How is it? There. Oh, yeah.
Do I still need to connect into the Wi-Fi? Should I go grab my computer?
Oh, you know what, Jordan?
What?
You want to tell them that whoever wants Wi-Fi access, check.
Yeah.
Okay, so I should grab my computer then?
Well, yeah, there were some people over here. So if anybody really needs, Wi-Fi access, this is Stephanie Stein, and you can add her as the host, stephanie.stein@verizondigitalmedia.com, and let her know, and she'll send you a password to get on the wireless network. If you really need it, here she is.
Here.
Anyone? No one? And it's okay. You don't have to be on the network.
Okay.
Huh?
So they just go on to.
So basically, they just load their browser, they're going to get the form. So have them just bring up your browser and they'll see a form. Then they fill out your name and your email address. They put in their email address, and then when they hit, they click on the register. You got to click on the register button, and then they add you as the sponsor and put in your email address. And then they got to put in their email address so it can send them the password.
When I talk to you, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Sorry,
What's up, man? I'm just trying to get my bonus live stream up. Now I've got one up. Now I'm trying to figure out this other one.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Hey, anytime. Thanks, Verizon Digital Media. And actually, you could tweet your thanks. It's Verizon Digital Media. So hey, at the UUASC Meetup, thanks Verizon Digital Media for hosting.
Sure, okay.
Anchor, and then hashtag Anchor Steve.
Anchor Steve.
Did you just look at the beer?
I just got in. I want to.
Okay. Well, hey, there's beer and food. So yeah, we'll get started in about 10 minutes. Just trying to Hail Mary pass here. So, Huh?
How's it going?
Well, I'm 1 for 2 in the live stream department. So,
How's it going?
good. I'm just trying to figure this out. So I'm going into knock chat because maybe those app support.
Like Gino was just here.
Yeah, I don't know if he's used it. So in Sin.
Well, he can drag somebody over here. That's
No, I'll hit him up.
You should have the capability to do this.
Well, no, I did it once.
I'm not very even seeing that dashboard you showed me.
Yeah, it's cool. Uplink is very slick. We got a shout match going on over there. Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, the thing is, I got a good stream going.
Yeah, I think we should probably get
Yeah. Let me hold on. Let me get some food. Hey, can you check this? Test this. I guess the stream's working. Huh? All right. All right, let's get started. All right, we're going to get started. Okay.
Turned off.
Twist it.
No, there's a button. Hold that in for a second.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to get started here. So if you want to hang out by the cake, you can keep standing. Welcome to the February 2016 Unix User Association of Southern California Meetup. Thanks, everybody, for coming. My name's Jordan Schwartz. I have been booking the presentations for the UUASC meetups for the last few years. And we're happy to have Chris Bradley come on in a few minutes to do a very interesting talk. But I did want to just mention a little bit about UUASC. UUASC is one of the oldest Unix, Linux-related meetups in Southern California. It's been going on for a long time, and even
predates Linux pretty much, and that's why it's not called the LUASC. That was a joke. Anyway, so how many people is the first time coming to a UUASC meeting? Okay, about 10, 15. So welcome. To be a member of UUASC, there are no dues whatsoever, nothing like that. If you wanted to join our mailing list, that would be awesome. Maybe we'll send you email or not. For whatever reason, Gmail was blocking email from our server, so I was blacked out for a couple months there, but our faithful admin, hi Mark, has fixed that. So if you go to uuasc.org, there's a thing about how to join our mailing list. We have 3 mailing lists. The general mailing list for discussion about Unix, Linux-related issues, pizza and beer or what have you. Also, there's a list called UUAC Announce. That's for announcements about, hey, the next meeting is coming up. It's going to be tomorrow. It's the lighter traffic. Some of these conventions we have are really kind of old school stuff. But back in the old days, you put your work account on the announce list, and but now the whole model has changed. And the final list is called UUASC-Jobs, and that is for if you're looking for work or you have a Unix or Linux-related job in Southern California, you can email that, send your info to that list. If you're looking for work, you can send a link to your resume or a text version of your resume, because our mail, some of our users are very paranoid, and we just want text-only email stream. If you have a job opportunity or know one, you can email there. It is a moderated list, but you do not need to be a member of the list to post to it. So if some recruiter is hounding you about some awesome opportunity, you can say, oh, just post it to UUAC-jobs at UUAC.org, and you can get the word out. So enough about that. Next thing, we try to meet the first Thursday of every month. Next month, there was an opportunity to have a interesting presentation from a new Meetup group starting called, I think it's #ILoveMonitoring. I think it was kind of jump-started by some of the monitoring folks here at Verizon Digital Media, and I saw that they were having this meeting. I think it's around March 23rd, 24th, something like that. Look on the Meetup site, you can get the date. But definitely keep an eye out for that one. But I'm also the first Thursday in April, I'm looking to do something, need a speaker for that, and so on and so on. So if you're interested in presenting at UUAC on something that has a Unix or Linux related tangent to it, please let me know or email me or us at leaders@uuac.org or hit me up on the meetup.com site. By the way, everybody should also, I assume everybody found out about this through the meetup.com site. That is definitely a great place to find out when the next meetup is happening, and you can contact me through that thing too. Other than that, I think that's just about it. Oh, and one other thing. I definitely want to thank Verizon Digital Media Services for this awesome location. They provided this nice space here. They've got a bunch of parking passes. Hopefully everybody got one. They brought us a whole bunch of sandwiches and, amazingly, a keg of Anchor Steam. That's pretty impressive. Oh, and also the cameras for the live stream. So consolation, folks, for you folks out on the inner tubes there as well. Hey, at least you get some good audio and video. And part of that is courtesy of Verizon Digital Media Services. Also, and of course I need to note, and I'm sure Chris may touch on the topic, Verizon Digital Media Services is always hiring. There is awesome work done in the content delivery network side of things. There's a lot of Linux work and heavy-duty networking stuff. So you could talk to Chris or myself, and Stephanie Stein is wandering around as well. If you're interested about any opportunities there, or just go to jobs.verizondigitalmedia.com. With that, but anyway, thanks once again, Verizon. With that out of the way, with no further ado, I'd like to, actually first, how could I forget? Elasticsearch is awesome. And Elasticsearch users in LA always meet up at Elasticsearch-LA. Here's Rich to tell you more.
Thank you, Joey. This is the first joint meeting that the Elastic user group of LA is doing. I've been hosting the organizer for LA for the last almost 1 year now. And I try to meet every Wednesday of third Wednesday of every month. And I'm going to start doing East Side, West Side. So the next meetup will be February 24th, and I'm going to for East Side event. And you know, how many people here are Elastic users, Elasticsearch users? How many people with the Elasticsearch meetup? Yeah, so some come through.
The couple.
But
Welcome.
we're working hard to really build up a good community and really trying to expand from East Side to West Side. Is to me, it's really important to really make it LA experience. So I look forward to seeing you guys, you know, at my meetups also. And I'll hand it over to Chris.
Well, actually, So let me introduce Chris Bradley. I was actually first caught this talk at an Elasticsearch-LA meetup a couple of years ago. And I was so impressed that I just had to come and join and work with him. So with no further ado, Chris Bradley on the amazing stone.
Yeah, I think what, a couple weeks after that presentation, I saw you in the hall.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's that, the stonefish is that amazing.
It's that amazing. All right, so thanks everyone for coming. I was surprised how many Elasticsearch users raised their hands. I expected more of a Unix crowd, but that's awesome. You know. So I'm just going to dive right in. I do have a couple of disclaimers to start with before I kind of get into the system. Okay. Oh, I see it's backwards. All right, so the first thing is there's a few pieces of the system, and I'll kind of explain what it is here after the fact, which is a little backwards. But there's a couple things that I can't talk about for security reasons. So what the software does is actually profile, identify, and mitigate attacks against our network in real time. And what I'm not going to talk about is some of the specific metrics we use to make those decisions. It doesn't really change the functionality of the system, what we're doing, how we're doing it. It's just a few key decision points that we don't want to publicize that might give attackers insight into what we're doing. And the second thing is the versions of software we're using in this particular instance are not on the bleeding edge. We're only using Elasticsearch 1.3.1. Which probably many of you out there are using a newer version. We're using a fairly recent version of Logstash for message transport, and I'll get into that. For the most part, it's all fairly standard. There is one last thing, though. I'm almost ashamed to admit it, but for those of you that are out there using Elasticsearch, you're probably using aggregations for your large queries and your filters. In our case, we're using facets. The first version of the Stonefish software was built on Elasticsearch 0.903. So it wasn't even a production release, and aggregations weren't supported then. And to be honest, we really haven't had a big need to go back. We're still hitting the performance metrics we care about, but it is on our plate to go back and deal with the facets versus aggregations issue. Aggregations do the same thing facets do, they just do it better. So we know we have a performance upgrade in our future once we're able to do that refactor. Just some terms that I'll probably throw out at some point during this. You know, we are a CDN, and so Anycast is how we do our GSLB, which is our global server load balancing. So I will be talking a lot about Anycast. It's a big part of our system here. But essentially, it's just using a single IP address, a shared IP address, to globally load balance to however many servers you want. Some of these are super generic. OSI layer 3 and 4, we're talking about IPv4, IPv6, TCP, UDP, ICMP. So the protocol applications that we're essentially ingesting traffic from the internet on. And I'm going to talk a lot about signatures. And what our terminology means here is essentially a tuple of packet properties. These are header properties for a TCP or UDP packet. And this is how we identify common factors during an attack. And then lastly, spoofing. That's just the process of faking your source address during a DDoS attack. It's very common. It's very easy to do. And so as a result, what you'll see during this is we do not rely on source addresses almost hardly ever. It's very rare. So without that, let's get into this a little bit. So our network is roughly 5% of the total internet. And as a result of that, it's under attack 24/7. I don't know of a single day where we weren't attacked at least once. On average, it's multiple times. So over the years, in order to deal with that, we've developed an application to automatically track all the traffic coming into our network, examine it, find common properties, determine what traffic's good, what traffic's bad, and then take action to filter that traffic that we determine is bad off of our network. You don't need to worry about Big Brother here. We don't store it long term. We look at the traffic in real time, make a decision, and move on. The reality is the volume of traffic is far too much for us to do anything else with it. On the slide, I write the term, to identify and mitigate attacks in fast timescales. For us, a fast timescale is 2 minutes anywhere in the world. So that means within the first minute we've identified it, within the second minute we stopped it. And that's across, 15,000 servers, over 100 POPs, every continent except Antarctica, I believe. So Stonefish itself is the name for a combination of open source software and custom built applications. We're definitely fans of open source here, and anywhere we can, we will utilize open source, and anywhere that it doesn't work for us, we will bolt on or build the applications to support it. But from my point of view, especially, open source can speed our time to production, and in many cases stability, because you have so many other people using it, relying on it, that bugs are found faster, and can oftentimes have a quicker time to resolution. So for parts of our system that required custom logic, they're built in Python. Certainly not the only language we use here, but it was what we used for this particular project. So CDNs and the DDoS problem, right? As a CDN, our job is to be fast, super performant, always up and running, never any downtime, so that our customers' content is getting out to where it needs to be as quickly as possible all the time. That's certainly the best case scenario, but it doesn't always happen like that as much as we try. But as a result of this, we're super sensitive to anything that impacts our performance. For example, our HTTP team, when they're looking at latency or what they're putting in the code path that could potentially impact performance, they're looking at it at the microsecond level. And so anything that I'm doing in the data path to identify and stop attacks, if it's adding any type of latency or decreasing our performance in any way, it's simply not, it wouldn't be deployed. It couldn't be in the network. So one of the biggest things, or one of the biggest focuses of what we were trying to do here was provide protection to our network, but not sacrifice performance. So as a result, we knew we wouldn't be able to stop every single attack against our network with this software. Our goal was really to stop the majority of attacks most of the time. If we could do that and really isolate any type of impacting attack to the most edge cases possible, then we consider the project a success. So that takes us to, why did we build this? And in order to really understand that, we have to go back to 2011. And at that point, we didn't have automated software to detect and monitor our network in this way. And we were under a barrage of attacks. I think it was in maybe the June timeframe, where for about 3 days, we were receiving upwards of 5 million DNS requests per second that were bogus. And so we dealt with them as we always had. We do a capture, we'd look at these packets, say, okay, here's the identifying properties of this particular attack, and we'd filter it off. And that process maybe took 10 or 15 minutes, but it was enough to overwhelm our DNS servers in that time, so our response time latency was going up, and our performance was impacted. And as soon as we deployed those filters globally, the vector of the attack would change, and we'd start that process over. And that went on for about 3.5 days. And it was a very long 3.5 days, but at the end of it, when the attack finally stopped, we realized that we needed to design something to do that for us, to make that process easier. So a couple of the key things that we got out of that were that the time to mitigation, or the time to identify and the time to mitigate, were not fast enough. They were totally not acceptable. And almost more importantly was that the level of effort required to do those things was very significant. Multiple engineers, people on conference calls in the middle of the night, people in the office all night. It just wasn't scalable. So those were really the reasons why we decided to come up with the Stonefish system. And one of the things here is that, going back to the Edgecast days, is all of our platforms are named after fish. It started with Sailfish, which is our HTTP server. So we came up with Stonefish for this one. If you're not familiar, Stonefish is one of the most venomous fish in the ocean, but it only uses its venom for defensive purposes only. It camouflages itself like a stone. Oftentimes you don't see it. If it's attacked, it releases its neurotoxin and goes on about its business. So it seemed rather appropriate for this particular project. So I did just kind of talk about these a bit, but the design goals of our system were to identify an attack anywhere in the world within 60 seconds, mitigate 99% of the attacks anywhere on our network in the world in 60 seconds, and monitor connection state information for millions of connections in near real time. And that turned out to be the most challenging part, and a lot of what this talk goes into. And we want to be able to block the most common attacks without human intervention. Some attacks against the network are more exotic. They're going to just require an engineering level interaction to figure out what's happening, why it's happening, and how to deal with it. There are sophisticated attacks out there, even though they're not incredibly common. So in those complex attacks, our system can dynamically generate rules, but it's not going to take action without human intervention. And that's a small subset of cases. But the main goal of the software when we set out was to streamline the process of threat detection through mitigation. So in order to really talk about this, I'm just going to throw up a very simplified view of a POP, of a VDNS POP. You've got a routing layer, a firewall layer, a load balancing layer, and what we call the edge layer. These would be the HTTP servers or the flash media servers, the FTP ingest servers, whatever might be happening in that pod. So at the routing layer, you've got your peers. You're connecting to every provider out there. We're totally agnostic. We connect with anyone and everyone that we can. And so at this layer, all you really have are ACLs in the router. Maybe the total set of ports coming into your network that you want to allow. In our case, it's pretty easy, 80 and 443. We can block stuff on other ports right there at the router, and we've greatly simplified our life. I guess we have to allow DNS as well. But, at the firewall layer, you have stateful inspection. Some of our POPs have firewalls, some of them simply don't for performance reasons. You can't do stateful inspection at terabit per second traffic levels. It's just not feasible. Well, maybe feasible, but not cost effective. I don't know. Load balancing layer, that's our control plane. So that's where we're taking connections in and we're determining where they need to go, which server is ready to take that connection, which one has the resources available to service it most quickly. And then the edge, that's the application layer. So whether it's the Sailfish HTTP cache or WAX server, the FMS streaming server, the FTP ingestion server, whatever the actual application is that users on the internet are interacting with. So with that in mind, here's the ecosystem of Stonefish. We rely on IP tables to do a lot of our work. So, my mouse over here. Okay. Essentially, what we do is we sample data at our load balancing layer using IP tables, logging, and these are pieces that I'm going to be going through in pretty good depth here shortly. So we sample this data, we transmit it using our syslog. So we've got servers all over the world collecting this data. We need to get it back to, excuse me. We need to get it back to a central point to analyze it. And so we use our syslog for that. Our syslog is pretty much on every Linux server out there already. It's very powerful, it's very fast, and it's very well supported. So on the cluster side, on our Elasticsearch cluster, we're running Logstash to ingest the data. And I'll talk about reasons why we did that and maybe why we wouldn't do that again. You know, it's good and it's bad. It's very powerful. So we receive that data from all of our edge servers with Logstash, and then we store that data directly into Elasticsearch. And this is where our custom software comes in. Our Stonefish software processes the data, looks for anomalies, figures out signatures for traffic we want to block, and then pushes rules back out to our edge servers. And this cycle keeps repeating, so we know if our rules are effective or not. So the Elasticsearch cluster we're using, we built to have 5 nines uptime. So it's got 240 cores, 640 gigs of RAM, and 120 terabytes of solid state storage. And it's all on redundant 10 gig links. So that's over multiple servers. So that's the horsepower that we're using to power the system. And you know, this cluster is ingesting hundreds of millions of records a day. So ingest rates can range anywhere from 8,000 records per second up to 25 or 30,000 records per second, depending on what's happening in the network. So collecting and storing the data. So like I mentioned, the data collection happens at the load balancing layer. That again is Linux. And we're using the statistic mode random in IP tables to sample data. And then we're using our syslog templating to take that kernel log message and format it into JSON. So right at the moment we log a message, it's already configured into the exact format to store into Elasticsearch. We don't have to do any other mutation to that record. What it does is it distributes the compute of the transmutation of the message to all of our edge servers. If we were doing this transmutation on the cluster, that's a significant amount of horsepower to parse out a long text string, which is a kernel message, format it into JSON, and then store it. So even though we have 240 cores, we want those for ingesting and querying data, not transmuting it. So we do that on the edge so that once the message goes into the network, it's never changed again. So Logstash receives that JSON, stores it straight into Elasticsearch. It does add a tag, but no other transmutation has to happen to it. And the way we build pretty much everything on our network is around horizontal scalability. And what that really means is that every server in the cluster is running the exact same hardware. So we don't have a couple of Logstash servers and a couple of Elasticsearch servers and a couple of Nginx servers to run our software. Every server runs in an identical stack. So any server can do the ingestion. It can store records to its local drive storage. It can do the Stonefish detection or run the Stonefish detection processes. But what it means is if we need more CPU or we need more storage or we need more memory, we can simply keep adding servers. We can solve our performance problems with hardware if need be. Now, obviously, It's not always cost effective. We certainly want to optimize our software as much as we can to make it the most performant as possible. But as our network grows, the amount of traffic we have to profile grows. And this gives us a very easy, scalable path to just add more servers as our load increases. So looking at the data flow, this is kind of how it breaks down. You've got inbound traffic hitting load balancers, kernel packet logging, taking that traffic and sending it to our syslog. Our syslog JSON formatting is then putting that onto the wire, TCP, TLS, encrypted. We didn't always do this, and you don't necessarily have to. You could go straight UDP for even more performance. That way, your edge servers don't care if the message gets there or not. When you're talking about profiling large volumes of traffic, it doesn't matter if you miss some records. You're sampling thousands and thousands of records a second. So if you miss a few, it's fine. And the performance gain of UDP over TCP, especially with encryption, is significant. So if you're not logging sensitive data, then there's absolutely no reason not to use UDP. So once that rsyslog transmission happens, Logstash, again, is listening on the cluster side and storing it over Elasticsearch HTTP output into the cluster. What we do is store different types of applications into different Elastic indexes. So whether it's a TCP SYN packet, a DNS packet, ICMP, or UDP, those would be into separate indexes. And I'll get into the reasons why more, but essentially it boils down to we want to run custom detection logic on each different type of traffic. Yeah?
You hinted at Logstash and how if you were to reuse now you might not use Logstash.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and then what does Logstash buy you?
Sure. Yeah, in fact, I will in a few slides. But the short answer is Logstash is incredibly useful at many types of inputs and many types of outputs. It can receive data in almost any format and output it in almost any format. Right, but if you have one data pattern and you want to send a lot of it, Logstash is good. I mean, it's good for us, but there's a guy in the back who will tell you about something that's better that we build because they have one input and one output. And so you can totally streamline that process and cut that data through much, much faster.
You can't go straight from rsyslog straight into Elastic.
There is an Elasticsearch module for rsyslog, but it's relatively new. You have to get kind of onto the bleeding edge of rsyslog. It doesn't have the reliability that we would expect yet, or that we need yet so far. So getting back to the data flow, we're storing these records into multiple indexes, and then we're running our threat detection logic on those indexes, and then we have a dashboard, which I'll get into as well, where we visualize this data. So I'm going to step through some of these pieces here, or most of them, and I'm going to start with the packet logging part. If you're a Linux user out there, dealing with security, you've probably touched IP tables at some point. So what I mentioned before is we're using the statistic module with the random option. And so the way that works is in these examples, I'm showing sampling of 1 out of 10,000 packets. That's not the number we use. This is one of the things that I've had to obscure. But what that means is, if you say I want to sample 1 out of 10,000 packets, you don't want to just see every 10,000th packet, because then you're kind of in this pattern of only seeing a particular packet in order. The better option that IP tables affords you with the random option is that you take buckets of 10,000 packets and then you randomly take one of them. Doesn't matter which one, just at random take one. Now go to the next bucket and randomly take another one. And that gives you a much clearer picture of the traffic coming into your network. So depending on your bandwidth, you might be sampling 1 out of 100 packets, or 1 out of 500, or 1 out of 1,000. Obviously, as the amount of traffic goes up, the less you need to sample to get a clear picture of what's happening in your network. So we're using multiple log rules to capture different traffic types. So the top one there is the SYN packets. It's far and away the largest volume of traffic we look at. And you know, for those not too much on the network side, when a new TCP connection happens, there's a handshake to establish that connection. The very first packet of that handshake is a SYN packet. The most common type of attack on the internet is a SYN flood, where you just fake a bunch of source addresses and send SYN requests to a server. The server's sitting there answering them, and it's filling up its connection table, but all those connections are going inactive because he's not getting a SYN-ACK back to the original packet. So you essentially just exhaust those servers' resources until it can't service valid connections, and there you have a DDoS attack that, you know, my 15-year-old daughter could do probably. So that is where we focus a lot of our energy. Aside from that, DNS. DNS is critical to our network. Anything that in fact impacts DNS is also very problematic, so we do spend a lot of time looking at DNS. ICMP and UDP are less of a factor. We don't, outside of DNS, there's no real need for UDP to hit our network. And ICMP, you know, a lot of times in ICMP floods, you're talking about high bandwidth volumes as a way to saturate the pipe. That'd have to be one big ICMP flood to hurt one of our pipes. That's, you know, that's all I can say is we're lucky in the scenario that we have a lot of bandwidth. So if somebody wanted to actually saturate us by using bandwidth, they'd have a very big challenge. It's far more effective to go the packet per second rate. Smaller packets, higher rate, more CPU resources is a much more effective attack. Okay, so these rules we've got on the top, you know, those are the actual commands to put those rules into the system, and right below it there in the output, that's what they look like in the IP tables chain. So it's just a representation of what those commands list. The result of this is, looking at the kernel log, is I've got some example packet logs. So this is kind of the raw data as the kernel, down here, as the kernel would log it. So this is what we're feeding into our syslog. It's got, you know, MAC addresses and things like that, which we certainly don't care about, but it's got IP addresses, it's got ports, it's got lengths, it's got all of your TCP or UDP headers, or ICMP in this case as well. So those are the bits of the packet we care about. We don't care about the payload. We don't care what content it is, what application, or anything like that. All we care about is the header, because that has the pieces of information that we're looking to analyze. So let's talk about our syslog a little bit. Our syslog is awesome, and our syslog sucks. And this is why. In order to mutate data in our syslog, you have to use their templating system. It's very powerful. You can do whatever you want with it. You can take data in any format and output it in any format, but it might take you 3 years to write the configuration for it. It's super ugly, as you can see. I mean, I don't know what to say about it. I do like it, and that's why we used it, because it allowed us to take data in one format and put it in another format. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more in the next slide, but just some of the other options to look at if you're considering sending data over our syslog. If you're using TCP, there's a very important thing that we've kind of learned the hard way here, and that is if our syslog can't send the message over a TCP connection, it will actually start process blocking the application trying to send the message. So if you're trying to send a kernel log message and it can't deliver it, it'll start process blocking the kernel. Bad things happen. Luckily, they do have a system known as disk-assisted queuing, where you can configure our syslog to store those messages locally until it can retransmit it when the remote end is back up, and keep your load balancers up and running. So there's lots of options there. I just wanted to throw it up here so that you know, someone looking at this later might have a starting point for where to go. And these slides are available online, so I'll have a link where you can download them. And
They're up on the Meetup site
on the Meetup site
and the YouTube page as well.
So just a few other of the our syslog pieces here. This top part, this is where we format a message from the kernel log into JSON. This next block is all of our disk queuing, what we do when we can't transmit messages. The third block there is the encryption. In our case, we're using TLS. This last line is actually what sends the message. So it's saying, take this message, and since it has 2 @ symbols, send it over TCP. If it had 1 @ symbol, that'd be UDP, because that's super clear. And send it to this particular IP address on this port using this template up above. And after that, stop processing the message. So that's in our syslog conf file, kind of in a nutshell. Like I said, our syslog is very fast. It's very performant. Sorry, my mouse. It's like backwards. Okay, I'll figure it out by the end. So here's the result. You take a kernel log message that looks like that single line of text, single string of text, and you output it into JSON like this. And that is totally compatible with Elasticsearch. So now we no longer have to do anything else to it. We just need to get it across the wire, ingest it into the cluster. So now that I've talked about our syslog, I will say that there's a lot of alternatives to our syslog. You could actually use Logstash. Logstash has the ability to send messages Logstash to Logstash. There's a project out there called Lumberjack, which is kind of a lightweight edge implementation of Logstash. Lots of custom code could accomplish this. All you need is something to, read a file or a handle, send it out over the wire. And I'm seeing more and more like pub subsystems, whether it's NSQ, Kafka, River, Rabbit, where you could actually write those messages into a system. You could publish into them, and then at your other end, you have a sub pulling those messages down, and you're letting the system itself transport those messages for you, and you're not worrying about that overhead. And there's tons of GitHub projects out there. If you're like, oh my God, these guys wrote it in Python, what were they thinking? Golang for life. You can find, Golang message shippers out there, or Perl if you're old school like that. Perl for life. Or if your rates are so high, you need to compile CAT. Any kind of thing you can think of, there's probably a project out there doing it. So don't necessarily say, oh, well, I'm using Elasticsearch, so I'm going to use Logstash. I'd highly recommend you really investigate what your performance needs are, what your kind of message I/O needs are, and choose a log shipper based on that. So we did use Logstash, and at the time it was because we didn't have a better alternative. We could have written one, but Logstash suited our needs pretty well. It wasn't perfect, but we weren't, at the inception of this project, we weren't totally sure on a few of the pieces. How was the message going to be formatted? Where are we going to actually send it in JSON? Maybe we should have used, protobuf, condensed the message down, made it smaller, and done something more sophisticated on the central side. So there was a lot of questions. So we said, well, we're going to start with Logstash to get something up and running, because we have a very quick deadline to meet, which is like yesterday, to get something out there to protect our network. So again, like my main point on Logstash is it gives really good performance with a lot of options. It's not going to give you the best performance, but it is very good. So pretty much every other project here at VDMS that uses message shipping in one way or another has not used Logstash. There's one other one, but I built it also, so it doesn't count, I guess. Oops. Okay, so let's just talk briefly about the Logstash config. It's broken into 2 pieces, an input and an output. The input, you're essentially saying, here's the message you're going to get on this port, and here's what it looks like. They have this entire kind of Grok mentality for configuring what the message looks like. changing it, mutating it, appending it, deleting it. We don't do any of that. We just say the codex JSON, and that's it. It does support SSL, so that's nice. And then output, this is where you say, I want you to send it to Elasticsearch. Logstat can be used without using Elasticsearch. It supports tons of output options. But you basically just point it at the host. In our case, we're using templates in Elasticsearch to define that JSON structure on what we want to index, what we don't want to index. So we tell Logstash what those templates are. And the reason for that is that for those using Elasticsearch, you're probably aware, it's a very common thing in Elasticsearch to shard your indexes by day. Or maybe you do it by an hour or a week. In our case, it's a 24-hour shard. So every 24 hours, let's say for SYN packets, we create a new index. Next 24 hours, a new index. Now, our system looks at 7 days worth of indexes at a time, so we can query all of that data as if it was one index. But you do that for performance reasons, for archival reasons, and I'll talk about it a little more here going forward. So, I guess that would have been good had I switched to the slide. So we store hundreds of millions of records a day. And so what happens is the more days we have open, the more records we have to sift through to find what we're looking for. So for this application, what we found is that having 7 days of indexes open and available is most effective for us. So that puts our queries looking at 800 million to 1 billion records on average. And we find that to be very performant. We can do that in a second or two. Originally when the system first went into production, we were trying to look at 30 days at a time. And you're looking at 10 or 15 billion records, not as performant. So that's a key metric when kind of deciding what your storage methodology is going to be, is how many records do you need to look at compared to the hardware you have available, because this is where your CPU and your memory really come into play. As you ingest records, you've got a heap. Actually, I'll hold on to that thought for a second. But in our case, our data sets range in granularity from seconds to months, and that's because we're storing thousands of records every second. But you can manipulate Elasticsearch based on the interval of your data. And then a key piece, if you're trying to decide if to use Elasticsearch for a project or not, is records in Elasticsearch are immutable. Once you write them, you can never change them. Now, they do have update functionality, but it's important to understand the underlying logic of what's happening there. It's not actually updating a record. It's creating a new record and marking the old one for deletion. And so you definitely burn a lot of space and performance, because even though that record's marked for deletion, it's still there. It still has to look at it and go, oh, that one's marked for deletion. And unless you're doing cleanup routines, it's just going to stay around. It's another reason we shard by day, because if we do need to manipulate records, within 7 days, those manipulated records are closed and we're never going to look at them again. So the performance of Elasticsearch. It's a Java app, so I'm sure there's people in this room that know more about tuning Java than I do. What we found here based on our testing is that, one, using the Oracle JVM direct from Oracle and not one built into a distribution like Ubuntu or Debian or whoever, that the original version outperforms them. I can't tell you specifically why, I can just tell you it does. And in the case of Elasticsearch, there's a few environment variables that make worlds of difference to your performance. One of them is the Java options for the min and max heap. And what we found is setting them to the same value keeps your heap static and prevents issues. We definitely saw issues early on where if you started with a relatively small heap and your max was very large and it was kind of cycling in between, it led to interesting behavior. So in all of our production environments, we have a fixed heap size for Java. We also, in our case, it's also 50% of the RAM on the system. So most of our servers are 64 gigs, so we're looking at 30 gig Java heaps. Elasticsearch also has a heap setting as well that we set to half the RAM size as well. There's a couple other Elasticsearch options to keep in mind that may or may not be applicable for what you're doing with it. One of them is async replication. So with Elasticsearch, you store a record and you have some number of replicas configured. By default, I think it's 1. So you store a record and it saves a copy of that record on another shard on another machine. The standard model is synchronous ingestion, which means you tell it, store this, it stores it once, it stores it twice, then it comes back and it tells you it stored it. So your process logs until it came back. With async replication, you can say, store this, it stores it locally and says, okay, I'm done, and then later on, in short order, does the async replication. In our case, because we're talking about very large volumes of packet data, even if we lose some, even if an async rep fails, that's okay. If you have very important data you don't want to lose, async replication is not for you.
Like Bitcoin mining info.
Interesting.
Or being a bank.
Right, absolutely. So the second noteworthy item here is bulk ingestion. You know, Elasticsearch, you can send it a record and it can store a record. Or you can say, wait till you get 1,000 records and then store them all at the same time. Or wait till you get 10,000. And by doing that, you're eliminating a lot of overhead and it can store much faster. So, you know, again, key decision points when kind of deciding, you know, how, if and how to use Elasticsearch. So the last piece on Elasticsearch here is security. Recent versions of Elasticsearch have authentication built in, right? It's a RESTful API that you're querying, and it has the power to delete an index or update an entire index or delete every shard you have. So you definitely want to put some authentication around it. Those on more recent versions will probably already know SSL authentication, it's all there. In the past, they didn't have anything. It was just a wide open, basically, port. And so what we did was use Nginx, so we could access it over SSL, reverse proxy it, and put ACLs based on authentication methods. So this group of authenticated users or tokens have read access, but this other group has write access, but only to this URL. Or this one, you know, is an admin one that has access to everything. Elastic has some great documentation on this. And if you're looking for ways to secure your cluster, I highly recommend you look at their documentation. But I'm a big fan of Nginx just because there's tons of different auth models out there, whether you're on Kerberos, Active Directory, LDAP, you know, or you're using auth tokens, OAuth, whatever it might be, there's likely an Nginx module for it, and you can simply integrate it straight into your cluster. Okay, so gone through, I think, all the components of the system, how we get a message, how we send a message, how we store a message. Now let's talk about what we do with the data, because that's the actual interesting part. So with Stonefish, we bring this all together, and here's the result. We get to visualize the data like this in real time. So this would be a map. Every one of those green dots is a pop on our network. We're using Flask, single page app with Angular, and D3 for the mapping. So those are proportional circles, larger circle, more traffic, smaller circle, less traffic. So this map is up on our NOC dashboards. It updates every 5 seconds, kind of seamlessly. And what happens is we get to see attacks in real time. So for example, this is looking at our DNS map. We've got 2 attacks, or 2 large volumes of traffic hitting 2 pops, with 2 other pops taking some smaller amounts of traffic. So we see our total load of DNS queries per second in this particular scenario was 2.7 million per second. And when we think about the scope of this is thousands of servers across the internet, data centralized, and within a matter of seconds, we're seeing a visual representation of exactly what our servers are doing. So, you know, staying on the dashboard side, what happens is we get to see patterns of traffic, and normal traffic is very consistent. For example, here, this top one, this is Miami, And you can see as it ramps down to midnight, the traffic bottoms out. As we get up into the morning, it peaks. That's a normal traffic pattern. This bottom one, which is FCN, no idea where that pop is, sorry. This is a relatively large SIN attack, and it actually has a common marker for a SIN attack, and that is there's a small probe early on where they test their resources and our resources. And then a large attack happens. And in this case, this attack lasted 9 hours at over a rate of 1 million per second. So what's happened is this thing is dynamically scaling. So this is the normal traffic pattern. This should look like this, but the rate of traffic coming in is so high that all we're seeing is the attack traffic. So we underestimated how powerful this would be when we originally built the system. We were thinking in terms of the back end, the logic of looking at the traffic and filtering it. But just being able to see it, being able to see, okay, yes, clearly this is not right, that really made a big difference to us. And as part of this, Elasticsearch really is what enabled us to do it. We didn't have to spend a lot of time writing crazy algorithms to look at traffic. We didn't have to try to imagine, how do we take these various properties in this data store and do this crazy thing with them? We said, wow, we can write a facet that says, here's the pieces of the columns in the JSON I care about. Give me the top scores. Boom, attack traffic's #1 instantly. It really trivialized the problem. We get a lot of credit for doing this vast, amazing thing, and really all we did was write like a couple queries. So that's what we do. We look for common packet properties based on thresholds. Give me every combination of these 5 fields, the addresses, the ports, the TCP or UDP headers that are over this threshold with this pop code. Boom. If I get a result, that's attack traffic. So not using Elasticsearch would have greatly complicated this and made it a much more difficult project to implement. One other note on this is Elasticsearch also has the trend data. So not only will it answer that simple query for me, but it'll tell me if it's trending up or trending down over the time period I asked it. So I can know, is an attack ramping up or is it ramping down, which is also very useful. So what we're doing is we're continually analyzing the data that we store in Elasticsearch. And again, this is done via Python. And we retrieve scores for what we call the signatures. And again, those are those combination of packet properties and addresses. And so we can say, give me, this 1 minute interval or this 5 minute interval and compare it to the previous 1 minute or 5 minute. So let's say in a 1 minute interval, it was doing 100,000 and the next minute it's doing 1 million. Well, something happened. So that's where our custom software comes in. Is a large customer spiking on a live event that just started? Because that'd be a pretty terrible time to filter their traffic. That hasn't happened, thankfully. But those are the decision points. Does the traffic exceed a minimum threshold? We're large enough now where small attacks we can maybe just ignore. And if the total volume of traffic for a particular pop is over a threshold, then let's look at the signatures. Now, are there signatures that are over a secondary lower threshold that we should examine? So if the answer to either of those are yes, then we need to generate signatures and score them. And Elasticsearch has a scoring system, but that's not what I'm referring to here. We did have to build kind of one algorithm, and that's to score signatures so we know kind of how dangerous they are. When you're a CDN and you start filtering traffic, it's relatively risky. And actually, that doesn't apply to a CDN. If you have a web server or a large website and you want to filter traffic to it, that's risky. Anytime you're potentially limiting customers from reaching your services, that's risky. I see I wrote aggregations here as being wishful. So what we do is we use facets, one-day aggregations. That's a hopeful slide. And we weight signatures, and we weight them against one another to determine, what's the percentage of this traffic of the total pop. Is this 80% of a pop's traffic in one signature? If so, no matter what, we got to filter it because that's bad. No valid traffic would ever be such a high percentage of a pop's total traffic. Compare this to previous data windows to determine is this normal or abnormal. So once we kind of look at the traffic and understand what's happening, let's take some actions. So there's some questions that we ask ourselves. What's the percentage of the total pop traffic and global traffic? Does the traffic meet the minimum threshold for us to care? Is this, traffic valid? Like I said, some customer has a live event, they spike up very heavily. We need to be aware of that. Is the signature specific enough to only filter attack traffic? And I'm going to talk about this a bit more on the next slide. And if the answer to these questions are yes, we need to filter this, we can send those rules to all of our servers around the globe within 60 seconds, and that traffic is dropped. Our application servers never see it, and life goes on. There is a cleanup piece here too. That is, we don't want to just leave rules out all over the place forever. And so once an attack stops, once we stop seeing the attack traffic, after a predetermined amount of time, we flush those rules out. If the attack comes back, they just get re-added. So, okay, so signatures. What we do is we score a particular signature. Oh my gosh, sorry. Okay. So we score a signature as a means of rating it, rating its danger level. So our scores range from 1 to 10. And whether we're talking about source, destination IPs, destination port, other TCP or UDP packet properties, there are common properties that are typically seen. Operating systems out there have default window sizes or default TTLs, or understanding how a TTL in the header works and how it's decremented for every router you transit, and that we're a CDN and that we're at most normally 5 hops away from somebody. We have a very good understanding of what valid TTLs we should be seeing. So if we're seeing a very abnormal TTL, well, we can score that higher. And there's lots of those factors that go into this score, so that once we get a number, if we say the score is higher than a 5, that's a very specific rule. That's a safe rule because it's going to filter the attack traffic and only a potentially very small subset of valid traffic, if any at all. Where it gets more complicated is if the score is lower, if it's under 5. Then we're basically saying, well, maybe it's using, Microsoft Windows default TCP stack settings. So if we filter this, we very well are filtering maybe all Microsoft Windows users or all Microsoft Windows users X number of hops away from our network. So those are the decision points that the system makes. So what we've done, though, is we've empowered our NOC that if it's got a high score, they don't even have to think about it. They can stop the attack. If it's got a low score, the lower the score, the more dangerous it is. We can involve engineering resources. We can look at this more. We can say, is the rate high enough to warrant filtering it and potentially filtering bad traffic? Or can we absorb this attack because luckily we have lots and lots of servers and bandwidth and maybe not filter valid traffic? So that's the scoring system. So what happens is every time we're attacked, we basically call it a threat, and we store that data. When the attack started, when it stopped, the anycast VIP on our network being attacked, the protocol in the attack, and the signatures along with their scores and rates and whatnot, and the total rate of the attack. So what it does is it gives us a historical view of the attacks hitting our network. So this was from December 18th, 2015 to December 31st. Those are all the attacks we saw. And you can see when they started, when they ended, In this case, they're all SYN attacks. The POPs that were targeted, the percentage of the POPs total traffic during the attack that was made up of attack traffic, and the total rate of the attack and the anycast death. And then, of course, this is an older one, so all of these attacks are inactive and the mitigation rules have been removed. So what you'll see if you really look at this is A, the average attack is less than 15 minutes. And B, the average attack size is somewhere between 2 and 300,000 packets per second. But that's certainly not the only ones. There's one December 19th. There's one 3.1 million. I remember that one. But so the system, though, Elasticsearch especially, it provided us this kind of wealth of historical data that we didn't have prior to doing this. And actually drilling into it a little more, it gives us this historical reporting. So here was a month that I picked at random in 2015. And so these are statistics that we're able to very quickly query out of the data in our cluster. We had 107 attacks, and then do some simple math on that, average of 3 a day. The largest attack was 3.7 million. The average total of POP traffic during an attack is 22%. Median 17, which is the more accurate number, because those big attacks really skew it. But so anytime we're getting attacked, very close to 20% of the total traffic going into a POP is attack traffic, which is significant to us, right? That means dollars. Average attack duration in this month was 21 minutes. The longest attack was over 13 hours. So based on these metrics, we're refining our system, we're updating it, and we're going forward. So let's talk a little bit about the success stories. The system's been in place for, I think, almost 2 years. It detected its first attack 30 seconds after we started giving it traffic.
Wow.
And since then, it's stopped several thousand attacks. We built the system to have 5.9 uptime, and it right now is sitting at 100%. It's never been down since it went into production. For us, no news is good news. There hasn't been a major news story, hold on, I'm finding wood, about VDMS being down as a result of an attack on our network. There's been lots of very high-profile attacks. I think of like Sony PSN 2014, right? They were down for a week, and that's not the only one. There's other companies out there. I'm not going to, throw a bunch of names around, but a lot of people have been in the news for being down as a result of DDoS attacks. Because the fact of the matter is, DDoS attacks are easy to carry out. Get yourself a couple Bitcoins, go find somebody with a botnet, and you're in business. And they're incredibly hard to track down. Providers out there, large providers, for some unknown reason, don't use reverse path filtering, so spoofing is running rampant. So at any rate, without getting into a huge rant on that, this is a major problem for large networks. So this system that I've described right now is protecting over 13 terabits per second of network capacity. 5% of the total internet is behind this. So that's where we're at. Additional info, there's my long email address. Make sure you write it down.
Yeah, you're up on the Meetup site too.
It's up there. The presentation is on the Meetup site, or you can just go to bit.ly/VDMS-PDF and download it. Like that was said in the beginning, if this is interesting to you, or technologies around this are interesting to you, we have a lot of open positions, so feel free to check out the jobs website, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
I'm just curious as to who does these SYN attacks and why.
Well, okay. I can speculate a lot, but I can tell you what I know, and that is there's a few scenarios. There's just the unknown out of the blue attacks, and whether it's originating from a particular country or company, you'll never really know because it's just out there, it's distributed. What has become fashionable in the last 9 months to a year is this DDoS via extortion. So you get an email to your corporate, abuse or info email address that says, you're going to give us 500 Bitcoins or we're going to attack your network. Or if you call the police, the attack's going to be bigger and it's going to last longer.
And doing it right before the Super Bowl is a good time for
that is,
organization.
I picked that slide in December for a reason, if I back up here, because it was a relatively busy month. What we found is going into, Black Monday, Cyber
yes.
Monday, whatever it's called. And as we got towards Christmas, the number of extortion attempts went up significantly. So in the past 6 months, we've actually created a relationship with the FBI where we are essentially helping them, track these people down. And while we can't force a customer to work with the FBI, because ultimately it's the customer that's getting extorted, we're going to do what we do to protect our network no matter what. Our stance is no, never pay them. Why would you do that? It just enables the behavior. But so there's a few notable ones out there. There's a group called DD4BC, DDoS for Bitcoins. And, if you think about it, what their approach is actually fairly smart. They got a good business model. They'll send out thousands of these emails and say, just, pay us like $250, right? Or we're going to DDoS you. And they do a couple big high-profile attacks. So they get their name in the news, so people think they're real and they're big. So if they send out 10,000 of those emails and maybe 100 or 200 or 500 people pay up, they didn't have to do anything except send an email. It's brilliant. There's another group, Armada Collective. You might have heard of them in the news. Interpol actually took them down 2 months ago. We were very happy about that. We were one of the companies supplying information that had been extorting or attempting to extort a number of our customers. So, I would say that motivation has got to be money most of the time. Or maybe, I feel like we've moved past the age of innocent kid trying something and, just for the fun of it. It seems like it's a business these days.
Well, what about the state actor stuff?
Certainly.
Yeah.
I think there's one country in particular that comes to mind that, seems responsible for a lot of attacks. And whether that's just in an attempt to take down content they find controversial or, some other means of being malicious, that there does seem to be state-sponsored activity out there.
So do you have a means to improve your filtering by letting customers tip you off that they have been the victim of an extortion attempt?
Well, yeah, so we do encourage our customers to let us know, and then we ask for their permission to share their data with the FBI. And if they say yes, great. If they say no, fine. No matter what, our network stance is the same because we have to stop the attack, right? And if you're on our network and you've configured your CDN interaction appropriately, that extortion attempt means nothing. But they are relatively sophisticated. What we've seen, I can't mention company names, but there was a particular customer who was attacked, and they were on our network, and we totally mitigated it, and they had no impact here. But they didn't properly protect their origin, and their origin was attacked at the same time and taken offline, and they weren't doing any caching, so their site went down. So that in those scenarios, there's only so much we can do. And in fact, that customer was working with the FBI, and that is one of the pieces of information that led to the FBI being able to provide information to Interpol to take down the Armada Collective. Yeah.
One question about the Elasticsearch details, not the
Sure.
DDoS. You mentioned the ingress rate around 20,000.
Yeah, our system roughly peaks around 20,000. It's low because that's all we need. It could go higher.
And the other interesting thing, the cluster is all efficient. That said, presumably they're not all.
Oh, well, yeah. Elasticsearch does a dynamic master selection. For the most part, there's not a lot happening between slaves and masters in the Elasticsearch world. It's not like other clusters where it's super heavily reliant on master selection. But yes, you're right. There is a master. I don't even know which one it is. Don't care. Don't have a dedicated master, and we don't do any specialized routing so that we're sending particular data to particular servers. Our whole deployment model is servers are interchangeable, so they literally are all identical in their software stack. Yeah.
Hey, have you been collecting data from the routers themselves?
Yes, absolutely. OpenFlow, NetFlow, absolutely. Can't talk too much about that.
So the mitigation is done by adding access rules on the router.
The mitigation is done by adding IP tables rules on at the load balancing layer. Potentially adding rules on the routers as well. The issue you have with router ACLs is you can't get very exotic in the rule format. Like, for example, a lot of routers won't let you filter on window size. It's too far into the header, so it impacts their performance too much. So depending on the type of filtering that needs to happen, it can a lot of times happens on our load balancing layer. Sometimes it happens on our routing layer.
So how many IP tables rules are there talking about?
Well, I mean, to stop an attack, if there's one signature, one rule. If there's 10 signatures, 10 rules. You know, I don't necessarily want to say how many total rules we have in our system because we're doing other things as well, but it's relatively small.
You're not needing one for the source IP.
Absolutely not. We do nothing based on source IP. They're spoofed, they're fake. If we were looking at sources, we'd be wasting our time. Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of proprietary stuff in there, some which lies in the signature, where you send the signature,
Right.
and the algorithms and sort of. Is there any plan of open sourcing other parts of Stonefish?
Open sourcing parts of Stonefish. Honestly, probably not. But I don't know that there's a lot there that would be like useful without, you know, the one key piece that we don't want to tell people about, and that is how we really determine what's good and bad. Yeah. But if you look at it kind of as a whole, you've got some servers with Elasticsearch, with Logstash, with Nginx, and then you've got a dashboard to visualize that data. You know, you could get very close to what those parts of the system are doing using an elk stack, especially with Kibana 4. You know, if you want to get into the data, I don't even know how useful open sourcing our secret sauce would be because our data is different than your data. Right. Yeah, we're definitely not in the business of helping others. Yeah.
Question one was, why not have an Elasticsearch cluster in different regions? Because these attacks are regional. And the second one is, now that you find a pattern in the attack, do you create some kind of modeling clusters and then do post-processing and try to match new attacks against the patterns that you saw in the past?
Okay, two great questions. First, why only one cluster right now? We are geographically dispersed. We have very fast transit in between our networks, regardless of the region. So it gives us some flexibility in only using a single location to do all this. It wouldn't surprise me if in the future we do segment by region. But one of the nice things about centralizing all this data is I can see if an attack is hitting a pop in Europe, a pop in Asia, and a pop in the US all at the same time with the exact same effort. I don't have to do any cross-regional queries or anything like that. So that's a nice benefit. The second part, or the second question was, once we identify an attack and a signature, do we apply some kind of templating logic to examine future traffic? And the answer is not really. And there's a reason why, and that is, there's only so much you can do with a packet header. And the odds that the header is 100% specific to an attack are very, very small. There are some things that we always see as part of an attack, and we do kind of examine traffic signatures for those things. But taking one particular signature and applying it to any set of traffic would not necessarily guarantee us that it's an attack, because, you know, it's TTLs and those things, they're just, you know, they're all over the place. So it's just not specific enough. Now, the guy in the back named Dave Andrews back there, who you should talk to. He handles our WAF at layer 7. So he's looking at the application layer and doing much more sophisticated things with signatures and detection and templating and just those things you described. At layer 3 and 4, I just don't have the data there to do those types of things. Does that answer your question? Cool. Did you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you said you're responsible for about 5% of the internet. So
Right.
do you ever talk to the other 95% providers because they have the same problem?
Right.
Shouldn't there be some kind of shared?
You are speaking my language. So the question was, we're 5%, do we work with the other 95%? The answer is I really, really want to. And in fact, I'm pushing the FBI to kind of to bridge the gap, because there's, I don't necessarily want to call it hostility, but there's rivalry. I don't want to share my network data with you. There's a lot of that happening, and it frustrates me so much, because if you think about a DDoS attack, it's happening from a particular botnet. And that means there's a network out there not doing reverse path filtering. One, I want to be able to call them and say, why not? It's been around for like 10 years. And second, I want to trace the traffic back. I want to be able to call our provider or our transit or our peer and say, okay, we're getting this traffic from you. Where are you getting it from? And then I want to call the next hop. Where are you getting it from? And I want to trace it back. If I wanted to do that today, it would probably take me 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd probably never get to the end. Now, meanwhile, the attack ended 5 minutes ago, and they're not storing that data. An hour later, they've already moved another 50 terabits of traffic, and that data's gone forever. So that's why. I mean, I really want to. And so we are in discussions with the FBI about creating, they do these other cyber kind of communities, they call them, for companies to get together to share data. We are pushing them to do the same type of thing at the network layer, which they're currently not.
Does the FBI have enough international scope to be the coordinator for this?
Probably not, but I feel like if we could get it set up here in the US, that we'd have enough pull to bring other people in other countries. So there's just a stunning lack of cooperation, though. It really is. I mean, it just blows my mind, because when you start looking at our totals of how many hours in a month, almost 53 hours in this particular month, our network was under attack. An average attack is 20% of our POP's traffic. So, the math is staggering on how much traffic on the internet is malicious, and it seems almost trivial to be able to stop it. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the question was, how do we, I think, within a reasonable latency, identify new attacks? So what we're doing is we're continually cycling through the packet data. So packet data is coming in 24/7, and almost in a loop, we're saying, show me the latest batch. Anything there? Nope. Show me the latest batch. Show me the latest batch. And that's happening very, very fast. So within 60 seconds, we know if there's an attack. And that's today. We're actually in the process of cutting our time intervals in half. When we originally started, really fast time scales was 60 seconds. And now today, really fast time scales are 30 seconds. So.
Does it mean continuous querying the Elasticsearch?
Continuously querying, yes. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Is it possible for an attack to mask another attack? Certainly. We've seen attacks where we get odd or high rates of DNS followed by odd or high rates of SYNs. We've seen attacks at layer 3 and 4 while the WAF team is seeing attacks at layer 7 simultaneously. So those are what we would consider kind of the more exotic or corner cases, but yes, they do happen for sure. Anything else? Yeah.
What's WAF?
It's a web application firewall. So it's essentially, operating in the HTTP server and examining traffic. And because it's at the application layer, in the server, it can be very intelligent and do amazing things that Stonefish can't do. Anything else? Yeah.
Are the security groups that exist, like, do you find a lot of people who are experiencing or working on the same types of stuff there?
Absolutely. At the CDN level, there's other CDNs out there that talk quite a bit about their DDoS that they stop and how amazing they are. And there's also, companies out there, Arbor Networks, Optimized Prolexic, things like that. There's entire companies built around doing this. An issue we have here at what we had at Edgecast and now at VDMS is that as a CDN, our network's large. We break equipment very easily. So we kind of find it fun sometimes too. But we can't just go to an Arbor Networks and say, yeah, give me some boxes. We need to stop DDoS attacks. We'd be putting like hundreds of these things into our POPs, and it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. It's just not feasible. So, for us, we have all these servers all over the world. So the question was, how do we leverage the compute power we already have and the infrastructure we already have to stop an attack without going to some third party and buying their service or their solution that probably will break in short order? All right, I'll turn it back over to Jordan.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Chris. It was quite an awesome talk. It's pretty amazing stuff. And he was mentioning the web application framework. Dave Andrews did do the talk here in December. Unfortunately, my video streaming contraption was epic fail that time, so it didn't get recorded. But maybe I'll be able to have him back soon to do that talk, because it's really interesting how they're doing rate limiting at the layer 7 level. And then how those guys work together at the different levels to sort out attacks is probably pretty interesting too. So next month, March 27th, is an InfluxDB talk, and Paulo is here from the. Come on down, Paulo, and tell us all about the I Love Monitoring Meetup that will be right here.
Hey guys, so next month the meetup would not be about Edgecast or Verizon, it would be about InfluxDB. So I'm Paulo, I work on the monitoring infrastructure team here at Verizon Edgecast. And for some reason I also organized the monitoring meetup here in LA.
Because you love monitoring.
So, yeah, there's no vested interest there. But yeah, I've invited some of my friends from InfluxDB. It's a time series database. They're flying in from San Francisco. We'll do some short session, mini hackathon, hands-on lab. So it's March 27th. So I hope you guys come here and then, yeah, check it out.
Cool. Thank you, Paul. See you on March 27th. Okay, so that's it for tonight. I don't know if anybody, sometimes we go out to a local pub or whatever, if anybody wants to hang out, let me know. Otherwise, see you. Oh, yeah, if you need parking tickets, Omar here will hook you up. And see you next month. Thank you, and thanks once again, Chris and Verizon Digital Media for hosting this. Awesome. And Dahlia needs a ride to Santa Monica. Please.
Thanks a lot.